This is The Coin Chat, the most trusted voice for all things cryptocurrency. Each week, we dissect an important issue and cut through the noise and misinformation out there in the world of the blockchain, cryptocurrency, and ICOs to capture the facts that truly matter to you that will give you an edge in this fast-moving emerging market. The who, what, where, when, and how of what you need to know in crypto to get ahead so you don't get left behind. Now here's your host, financial expert and CEO of Coinvestor.io, Steve Good.
Hey everyone, this is Steve Good and welcome back to the podcast. Returning, of course, as normal is my co-podcaster, Yuri Cataldo. And joining us today, the lovely Tina Fotherby from Famous Publicity, based out in the UK. Tina, welcome to the program. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, it's my pleasure. It's lovely to meet you both again.
And Yuri, I would say it's lovely to see you, but you know, it is.
I know where I stand, don't you worry. But it's good to be here again, Steve.
I'm not worried. I know you're coming back every week anyway.
You can't get rid of me. I've been sticking around for a while.
So before we jump into all about Tina and Famous Publicity, have you guys been following the news at all this week in terms of all the madness? Of course, crypto is down quite a lot. You know, about a week and a half ago, Ether was at 800. Now it's down to, it just hit a few minutes ago, 450, which was a little bit scary because it's like a 50% down in 2 weeks, which is not very pleasant. So have you guys been following any of that in terms of the news and what's happening?
A little bit, but I have to say I'm going to sound like a Neanderthal. But when I see this going up and going down, I think, well, that's what you expect, isn't it? It's volatile. It gives people something to write about. It gives those critics something to complain about. So
absolutely true. Yeah,
it's interesting because in many ways, let's just say that what amazes me is how much copy is written about things that we know are going to change, and perhaps the challenge is for people to find better stories to write about crypto.
Okay, so interesting you said about things that are going to change. I'll tell you something that hasn't changed.
What's that?
Bitcoin is still trending more positively than Beyonce. And that is in the news this week, in fact. So
yes.
I appreciate that sentiment, Tina, and for that I had to throw that in.
That's lovely. And how wonderful is Beyonce? So yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, she's probably not very happy that Bitcoin is trending more than she is.
Yes.
Anyway, so why don't you tell us? Well, Yuri, you want to ask a question, don't you? You have your weekly questions that you want to throw in, don't you?
I do, my usual weekly questions. So we'll have with Tina on this one. So Tina, have you tried to spend any Bitcoin this week or just in general?
Yes, and there is a friend whose office is just a few doors away from mine, and he's a young guy who works for an IT firm, and he mines cryptos. And basically, I needed help. So I'm sounding desperate here. I had an old laptop with some very valuable photographs on it that needed to be moved. And basically, he hacked into my old laptop, pulled it apart, and found the files. And I rewarded him with Bitcoin, and he was thrilled to bits. Now, he's a young guy. He's about 22 and really understands the whole crypto area. His problem is actually having enough money to get hold of cryptos. But he was thrilled to bits. And I have to say that...
thrilled to Bitcoins, you mean?
Thrilled to Bitcoins. Good one. I love it. Thrilled to bits. I can't believe I said that. And
couldn't have scripted that one.
No, exactly. And I have to say that my take on it is that Bitcoin is the grandmaster cryptocurrency. Yes, it's criticized. We're told that the transaction levels are slow, etc. But I'm really, really proud to have the relatively small amount of Bitcoin that I have. I'm really pleased to have it because actually it's relatively difficult to get hold of, I think. And I do love the whole story behind Bitcoin. I'm sorry, I buy into it. I think it's fantastic. And all of the highs and the lows We know what happened with exchanges and people losing funds. All of that just adds to the mystique to me. And
Right.
I love it. I love the thought of having an asset that's volatile, but also I think very valuable. And, the value is beyond the rate that's quoted. I just feel really thrilled. I should say I am the most useless late adopter on cryptos. I've got friends who bought in very early days, and it was just off the radar for me, completely off the radar. I think I was a bit preoccupied with other things, but once the penny, excuse the pun, penny dropped, and once you get into the whole
Once the Satoshi dropped, we just got to have to keep,
that's right, the Satoshi.
Our language is going to change. In a few years, we're going to be talking about, the Bitcoin
Yes.
dropping and the Satoshi dropping and whatever else. It's going to be a whole new language,
And what I love the design, the logo design. I like the story. I like the name. I like the bit element. And if I'm not totally honest, it pains me to ever use Bitcoin. I just want to hang on to it. I want to hang on to it for 10, 20 years and give it to my kids and say, when you took the mickey out of me and saying I was mad, well, there's that, assuming I might still be around. But that's it. That's how I see it. Mm-hmm. I think if you're into cryptos, then you've got to love your Bitcoin. Really, that's my take on it. I've read up on the subject, and I love all of the, whenever, you get the same old stories coming about the amount of Bitcoin associated with money laundering and all kinds of crimes. I just think it's just another reason to say, hang on to it.
Yeah, in fact, there was something I saw in the news that there's a proposed bill in the U.S. Congress that would commission the study of crypto in sex trafficking, interestingly enough. So that just came out in the news this week as well. So, it's been a really, not to change the subject, but it's been an interesting week because you mentioned about hacking. And there was the Korean exchange that got hacked over the weekend, which is what people thought was what triggered the whole sell-off we're experiencing. But then, of course, you've moved us very nicely to the fact that there's other things to consider, like holding versus being part of sex trafficking, child pornography, money laundering, and all the other, gun selling, and there's a lot of other, but all that weird stuff has always gone on regardless, and people have always found creative ways to do it, and crypto is just another way of looking to do it. I have heard that the FBI, for example, they've admitted themselves they can't find a way to legitimately track transactions going through private coins, but I guess they're going to do some things I've heard about trying to access certain key data or transaction data that you'll be required to hold it and share it in case you get subpoenaed. So there are some changes coming there. This is just some early information I've heard from some analysts in the industry. It's not come out publicly in the news yet, but it's on the way. There's some stuff going on there, but yeah, there's a lot of interesting things going on with this space in terms of money movement and not tracking, although actually tracking it's not as hard as everyone thinks. As long as you know the source and destination, all the ones in the middle are just people moving it from place to place. It's not hard to follow.
Exactly. And perhaps it's a little bit outrageous to suggest it, but it does seem to be that there's sort of, it's very easy to have anti-PR going on about cryptos. So, for example, if you think of who ultimately is going to lose out, when cryptos, basically take over from fiat, who loses out? And it's got to be in their interests to, really try and downgrade and rubbish. Almost, it's what gets to me is the sentiment. So they're attacking the sentiment. Yeah. So actually trying to make you feel a bad person because you have Bitcoin. But actually, do you know what's really weird? All these crimes have been going on since the Roman times and since people had coins.
Yeah.
And what about filthy lucre? Let's focus on that. So it's very interesting because I really feel as though it is astonishing how, to be very simplistic, so I'm exaggerating just to make the point, but an awful lot of mainstream media is really anti-cryptocurrency per se. They really are anti, and it's broad. I think it's attached to the old world. It's the advertisers, the established insurance. If you look at insurance companies and their influence over our lives,
yeah,
they're in massive influence, which nobody really fesses up to. but so much of the news is associated with insurance companies.
Oh,
And
yeah, of course.
And when you
Protecting
look
your
at,
existing business, and either you adapt or you die, right?
Exactly.
And I think more people tend to take the approach of not invented here. I'll just poo-poo it and I'll be negative about it in public because surely no one's going to buy into it. And usually those are the ones that get left behind and they become obsoleted because they chose not to engage and they said, I'm not going to even investigate it. And this is a classic, mega shift in who's going to be around in business and who's not. I mean, Amazon hasn't, held back in buying URLs. Facebook has openly admitted they're testing out blockchain. Telegram is now, done an ICO for blockchain.
Yes.
The FBI owns Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Publicly they have said they own about 2%. So, those organizations, whether they're governmental or public, they're not going to go away because they're going to find ways to innovate and use it. And if other companies decide not to engage in crypto, blockchain, and the technology behind it, surely they're going to end up falling behind and they're going to make themselves obsoleted for not staying relevant.
Mm-hmm. I would also say that there's possibly, obviously there is no evidence except for the sentiment that I'm hearing,
Mm-hmm.
but I would say that there is a dual campaign which is slated as much as possible to the general public.
Yep.
And obviously use the media to do it, whilst banking and collecting as much as you can at the lowest possible price.
Well, the interesting thing about, I don't disagree with that. I think what I think is interesting is because I speak to a couple of fund managers as well who have, direct access to what's going on in the futures markets. And they're very openly saying to me that a lot of the trading that's going on is unfortunately, bigger money moving Bitcoin around based on futures contracts. And of course, nobody wants to lose money on their contracts, so they're all making sure that they, slap each other on the back and they make it. It's not directly what they're saying. It's how I'm interpreting it because I like to be a little bit controversial about the realities of all this. And, great, give you guys all a slap on the back, but don't mess up the rest of us by intentionally pushing a coin a certain direction and then back up again because you've got another contract going the other way. But you know what? That won't go on for very long either because regulatory won't put up with it. So, the thing is, if they start to spot variances in this, it'll get caught out very quickly, and they'll just, they'll make a few scapegoats out of a few people, and then the rest of us will fortunately see the benefits of that by being able to say, great, now the manipulation's probably minimized and we're back to sort of normal working again.
Absolutely.
Because there's been other stories. There's a story today, in fact, that was on the Cointelegraph about how there's some speculation, and it is speculation that USD Tether and Bitfinex, who are the Bitfinex, the exchange, USD Tether is the coin that's apparently tied to the USD. They're both owned by the same parent company called iTether. And there's been some speculation that those two companies collaborated together for the point of manipulating Bitcoin to the height that it reached last year in 2017. Yes. But again, it's speculated. It's not substantiated, but it's just people, as you say, in the media looking for things good, bad, and ugly, because it's easier to bring out bad news. And some of that media is manipulated. Some of it is just spun because people don't like what's going on and they're losing control. But fortunately, some of the news is positive and good too. So we like to grab onto those.
Absolutely. And I think actually the other thing is that there's so many good things going on in terms of the ICO space. The funding's still coming through very strongly. I don't know if you read it, but there's a fantastic report that ICO Bench do. They do a weekly report that's free. And
really?
Yeah, it's really, really great. And you just go to their website, put in your email address, and you can download this comprehensive report. It's weekly, over 22 pages long. And in May, 1 week of May, the week ending June 4th, starting May 28th, there were 50 ICOs completed, 50, which is phenomenal. And actually, look, they've calculated the revenue coming through the time period, and basically, May was a really big bumper month for revenue through ICOs, and also interestingly, I'll just tell you what it came up with. So there are 129 ICOs in May, and the revenue generated was 1.023 billion. And March, they had 122 ICOs, which was 1.726 billion.
Wow.
Now, the great thing is an awful lot of those monies raised